Ben Edwards and John Watson are ready. Ben, is it fair to expect most to be on a one-stopper?
Yeah, I think that probably is true, Matt. We have seen a few people make two stops in the past here. Rubens Barrichello made a couple of stops last year, but I think one stop will be the more favoured route. And what we do have to watch out for today particularly is that they may change the aerodynamic setup of the car from qualifying yesterday. They might quite differently in race conditions today, John.
Yes, I think one of the problems teams have realised is after qualifying, the tyre choices that they made, and with the increase in temperature, it may produce an entirely different result, particularly as you're expecting Sunday to be the warmest of the 3 days of this Grand Prix. So what teams will do will to some degree be determined by this morning's 30-minute session, but of course it's much cooler. It's only 19 degrees in track, 17 ambient. It's very different to what we had at the end of qualifying when it was up in the high 20s, low 30s. So for teams like Williams here with Montoya, who ended up in the second row of the grid, but they were very disappointed with it. David Coulthard, on the other hand, did a very good job, and I think that's a reflection of the McLaren aerodynamics and chassis more than anything else. So they're the ones that seem to gain most and benefit most. But for people like Jaguar, who lost out big time, well, I don't know what they do. I think they'll have to look very closely at what they think they can get away with. But starting down the field, Eddie, starting just outside the top 10, he's not going to be very happy to start there. He knows that will inhibit or limit what he is going to be capable of doing come the 73-lap Grand Prix.
Well, it's a little bit of a surprise to see Coulthard not in either car at the moment. Of course, the spare cars come into operation now as well. There's a lot of frantic activity going on in the McLaren pit. It looks to me as though they may have encountered some problems right at the start of this warm-up. Fantastic job at the end of qualifying to snatch third place for David Coulthard. But at the moment, he hasn't been able to complete an installation lap in either car.
So I think also Ralf Schumacher just makes his way out. He was the other driver that hadn't gone out with that first flush of cars. So Ralf Schumacher, no problem. David Coulthard, not fretting as yet, but clearly a lot of work going on. And certainly whether it's mechanical or they're trying to get, I don't know what they're doing. They're working around the front suspension, but also all around the back of the car. And I suspect it's a potentiometer or something to do with the throttle. It
almost looks like the car's actually the spare set up for Raikkonen, that perhaps he's got a problem with his race car, and they're busily now setting the spare car up for David so that they can get him out there. That's what it perhaps looks like. Barrichello has the spare car, hence the little dash that we have become familiar with this site over the last few Grand Prix. Michael Schumacher hasn't had the spare car for a while, has he?
No, since the championship was tied up for Michael, then the spare car has been dedicated to Barrichello in an effort by the team to get Barrichello up into second place in the Drivers' Championship. As we watch Eddie Irvine braking rather late as he comes into the Jaguar garage. So Barrichello, workload since he's had the spare car has gone up, and it's quite nice, you know, in many respects, when you've only got to drive one car in this 30-minute session. You can get into a nice rhythm, and you leave all the hard work, the donkey work, to your team leader. So now Rubens carrying that responsibility and maybe not getting that rhythm that he would probably have enjoyed prior to this privilege.
Well, Michael Schumacher maintaining his dominant qualifying form at Indianapolis. David Coulthard still waiting for a chance to get out in either car. There is the frantic activity going on the spare car at the moment as they are moving seats around, as you can see. So they're looking Coulthard's seat into the spare car. So it obviously was set up for Raikkonen. There is a problem with his race car, and that's the reason for all the work.
The floor, Ben, is coming off, so it looks pretty much like there's an engine problem, which is, of course, probably a fresh engine, or would have been a fresh engine fitted overnight. That would have been fired up last night, and it would have been then fired up sometime before the session began. But at the point when they're about to go out and the engine's fired up, something showed up on the telemetry, and they decided they cannot afford to let Coulthard go out and have an engine failure apart from anything else. It's embarrassing.
A great shame for him, though, because he's now got to get used to the spare car. In fact, the spare car was used by Raikkonen in qualifying yesterday. They had a problem. They didn't. You remember, Raikkonen went off in the morning, and they had got the car basically repaired in time. They decided to send Raikkonen out in his first run in the spare car, and though they had then repaired his race car, he stayed with the spare for the rest of the session.
Yes, and he wasn't entirely happy with that spare car. But again, it's a judgment the team have to make when a car's had even a small amount of damage like that, and you're in that pressure zone. Do you start hopping from one car to the other? So the team took the decision to let Raikkonen start run through the entire qualifying session in the T car. He ended up 6th quickest, no doubt disappointed, and that was, I'm sure, what we saw after qualifying, the look of disappointment on his face, and conversation with Ron Dennis, whereas David Coulthard had a run, and particularly in that final run, where he did a great job to get into third place.
Ron Dennis getting involved and seeing exactly what's going on here. It's obviously a bit of a shock to everybody if the race car doesn't work at the beginning of the warm-up. Martin Brundle there to the side of David Coulthard, hearing the explanation as to what the problem is.
Yes, of course, Brundle looks after David Coulthard, he's his manager, and whatever that problem is, no doubt. Well, that doesn't look even when he's just explaining something else. It wasn't about the actual problem that's prevented him getting out. That's another issue. But Barrichello just moving around the racetrack.
Yes, heading down.
Well, again, not even an installation lap. This is back into his race car as Coulthard now gets into the spare car. And of course, David Coulthard taller than Kimi Räikkönen, and seats, pedal position, steering position. To some degree, they might try to compromise a little bit in the spare car, but they still will have to make changes just simply to get one driver comfortable and secure while the clock just ticks away.
Nobody has set a true flying lap as yet, although Alan McNish is on a flying lap now, so at a first indicator, oh no, he's coming straight back in again, so still nobody coming in, nobody coming across the line to complete a flying lap. It's all in the systems, checking the engines, after all the hard work that was done yesterday evening in preparing the cars for the race. Räikkönen heads out as the work continues on the spare car. Down towards the launch control practice area. Let's just watch here. Gets away cleanly, so no problem for Räikkönen. And Peter, I think you've got some information as to what's going on for David Coulthard.
Well, the only thing I can glean at the moment, Ben, is that there's some sort of oil leak in the race car. So obviously DC standing by at the moment while the spare car is changed from the Kimi Räikkönen pedal setup to the DC pedal setup. Quite a big job, I would imagine, because remember, DC still likes to have the opportunity to right foot brake if he needs to. So presumably very different pedal setups between Räikkönen and David Coulthard. So frustrating time for McLaren. We see Ron Dennis there just chatting to one of the mechanics. But looks like major work about to take place on the DC race car on the stands there.
Let's hope that they can get that car all sorted out for this afternoon's Grand Prix, and he can start from his second best qualifying position of this season. Meanwhile, we're watching Eddie Irvine on track, and he is fastest so far, the first to complete a flying lap, but he now comes straight back in again. So now Barrichello dancing around again from race car to spare car and back into the race car just to check all the systems are working.
Yes, Ben, we're just getting word from the pit lane, just following up what Peter Windsor was telling us. In fact, it's not an oil leak, but is actually a fuel leak, which of course is very important to ensure that you don't fire the car up. So a lot of work for the McLaren Mercedes guys to repair that leak, and it's very, very unlikely they'll be able to do that in the remaining 21 minutes with the amount of body work, underbody they'll have to remove. So David Coulthard left with the only option, that's to get into the spare car, go out, do some running, and just get a feel for how the track is. But again, it's going to be a real problem for a lot of those teams. They'll find the car will feel quite comfortable. There'll be higher levels of grip than they might have experienced in qualifying yesterday. And then, of course, waiting the 4 hours from the end of this session until the Grand Prix itself, then we expect to see quite a substantial rise in the ambient and track temperature.
Giancarlo Fisichella will start 9th this afternoon. That's the 6th time this season that he's qualified in the top 10. So a reasonable effort. They were hoping for top 8, but top 10 will do, as we heard EJ telling us just before the start of this session. Now, Coulthard ready to come out. They're just manoeuvring the car around a little bit to make sure he can get out past the middle post. And both McLarens now are running. And
Kimi Räikkönen about to go fastest. It is Heidfeld right now, but Räikkönen beats that time by just over half a second, so a 14-1 on what is effectively his first really flying lap in anger, and a pretty good effort too. And that just makes you wonder, when you consider what Räikkönen did in qualifying, he did an 11.6, so he's 3 and a bit seconds off that. And I just wonder how much fuel on board McLaren are carrying in his car right now.
A little bit up on the next sector, but of course we expect times to be a fair bit slower in the warm-up as they run with a heavy fuel load on board. And the McLaren chassis has worked very well in race conditions at various times throughout the season. Manicourt, of course, the one we remember, with Raikkonen having his opportunity to win, blown by going off on the oil laid down by Alan McNish. But don't forget, that was actually the last time that David Coulthard was on the podium as well. That was Manicourt, the French Grand Prix, so it's been a little while since DC's been top three. Got a good opportunity starting third here today.
So Raikkonen, and in fact he was quickest in first sector, slightly down in the second sector, but now Michael Schumacher has gone quickest in that first sector. Michael Schumacher just in that middle part of the track as Raikkonen comes up to go across the line and see if there's any improvement. No, it's not, a tenth of a second away.
So at the moment, Raikkonen fastest from Panis and Villeneuve, the two BAR Hondas again showing well. Mika Salo showing a lot better so far than he did in qualifying yesterday, and that could allow for quite an exciting race. Now, what they will have to try and work out is how much wing they decide to run for the race, because if you can be fast on this section of track, where Michael is just showing us as he comes through the banking now, if you can get a good top speed up here, then you've got an opportunity perhaps to outbrake someone else into the first corner.
Well, top speeds, and Michael Schumacher goes quickest by over half a second. Top speeds quickest, in fact, is Salo in the Toyota, but of course that doesn't relate very much to a lap time. Salo 6th quickest on a 14.6. Michael Schumacher quickest on a 13.4, 1.2 seconds difference.
Interesting though, that's of Salo, John, because yesterday he was third slowest across the speed trap in qualifying, only 332 kilometres per hour, and already he's done 339 kilometres per hour. That's about 213 miles per hour. So they, as we were saying, they probably reduced the downforce levels. That's better for the race, and maybe they just went too far with the amount of downforce in qualifying yesterday.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, I think there's no point running at 205 miles an hour when your competitors are doing 213 or 14. So you have to take wing off, and it may well be that they've got a better overall balance, but of course again it's to do with the time of day they're running and the ambient temperatures, which are low, and the track temperature, which is low.
Well, David Coulthard's race car is still being worked on, and in fact they've just fired up the engine, so they're looking to see if they've cured that fuel leak. Let's hope that they've got that sorted out. Barrichello heads round. Let's see whether he's close to the time that's been set already. He's moving down to the inside to try and clean the track up a little bit, but he's a fair bit slower than his teammate at this stage.
Michael Schumacher just behind him, and he's going to come across the line, so a little bit slower than his previous lap. Barrichello quick, he was actually on an out lap, and as he came across the line he recorded that fastest sector time as he begins what is now going to be his 7th actual timed lap this morning.
Montoya disappointed to lose third place on the last knockings of that qualifying session yesterday, when Coulthard grabbed it away by 1/1000th of a second. Heidfeld and Fisichella. Maybe a little problem there for Fisichella. One of the Jordan guys.
Somebody push it back across the line.
And
what happened?
So he's stuck there. He needs to get the car pushed back into the pit lane, so he's going to have to get out and do that.
Giancarlo, get out, push the car back over the white line behind you. Get out and push the car back.
Not the sort of normal Sunday morning activity you'd expect, so out he gets.
That was Gary Anderson actually on the phone there, telling Fisichella what to do.
And that's the white line. He's got to push the car behind before the mechanics can then take control of the car and take it back to the Jordan garage. So get the front wheels over it, Giancarlo, get all of the car over that.
The white line, and then get the starter in. Yeah, he is, we've got it. Okay, get him back in then. Get him back in, Andy.
Giancarlo doesn't have a clue what's going on. They should read the rule book. I think it's one of the books that...
His mechanics down there now, and the guy who normally comes down to strap him in is there. Goes through the little routine. Fisichella, he's been in this position many times. He's not too flustered by it. Now they've changed their mind. They're going to push him back, perhaps reset everything. They might have to plug the laptops in once again.
Come right back to the left. Or to your right.
Maybe they're just getting out of the way.
Yeah, no, truly on an improving lap for him. He's only done one lap, which was basically in and out, and no time. So he again pulls over to the right to try and clean up that, goes 7th quickest, just to help if possible. I mean, it's almost irrelevant because we're going to have a Porsche Michelin Super Cup race coming up very shortly after this session anyway. So I think drivers do that in the forlorn belief that it is going to make a difference to them when they start the Grand Prix.
riding with Nick Heidfeld with the Sauber, and we've got that fantastic battle in prospect between Sauber, BAR, Honda, also Jordan as well, and the Jaguars a little bit behind, but it promises to be quite a spectacular, action-packed battle.
The Viper, you don't have to do a learning. Don't do a learning, just do your start.
Look at all those buttons he's got to think about.
Well, it's all a bit messy down at the end of the pit lane because the BAR, it's just done its launch control now.
I think he said
control 5. You look good.
I think it was a case of too many people speaking at the same time. There was more confusion than there was clarity.
Well, I think they're going to have to recheck all the settings on that and sort out the launch control, so he may have to come back in the pits soon and get that worked out. Now, Ralf Schumacher preparing to come back out once more, but it does look as though Williams are restricting that mileage a little bit again.
Yes, Ralph just did that one lap, came straight back in, and it's with just over 13 minutes to go, so he will go back out. So again, the case of what we've seen pretty much all year, that there will be a restriction on mileage, certainly on one of the BMW engine, Williams today. Montoya, he's doing a few more laps. He's on his 9th lap, and he obviously doesn't have that same issue.
Now, we've seen David having to go out in the spare car. Peter Windsor is with Ron Dennis to find out more.
Ron, I wonder if you can just give us a quick update on the DC race car there.
Has a very small fuel leak from, we think, the rear hatch. And it's just prudently, we're not running it. Very small chance of having a problem, but it's, you know, the car's all the same, so it's really not worth taking a risk. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Peter. Well, it's good to know that they're not too concerned about it. They can get that sorted out for the race this afternoon, and they can still work through their programme using the spare car. Kimi Raikkonen's just coming out again, by the way, as we're watching Montoya. Montoya crosses the line, and currently quite a long way down. He's in 12th place with that time.
Yes, again, pulls across onto the dirty side of the racetrack. So Juan Pablo Montoya starting on the right, and he's going to be directed behind Barrichello, so that's why we've seen Barrichello, now Montoya. We've also seen Jarno Trulli do the same thing as well, and that is Coulthard's car. They're working very well, they're working flat out basically to try and get the car ready to get it out and give it a run before this session concludes. There's just over 12 minutes remaining. If they can do it, it'll be tight. I think it's going to be probably too tight.
Eddie Irvine goes second fastest. That's more like it. It's more like we saw yesterday morning.
Oh, Eddie, did he turn in and did the back end step out? Well, there's an early morning wake-up call for the Ulsterman. He didn't expect that one. He thought the car gone second quickest, plenty of grip, good feel, good balance, turned the wheel and the back end just let go. Well, I've never seen a back end let go as quickly as that. Certainly did a good job keeping it in control, but had to go down the escape hatch.
Yes, Mark Webber, good job from him yesterday in qualifying, ahead of Mika Salo. Let's take a look at that again, John, from on board.
And this is very, very rapid indeed. Turns. Oh, look at that! And that was an instinctive reaction. Just the front wheels would have turned, and he was on the case straight away. Good job, kept the car on the road, and well, that'll certainly give him a little thought or two. You'd say, where did that come from?
Takuma Sato suffered a failed engine yesterday morning, which limited his running, of course.
But Ben is quickest of all in that middle sector. Takuma Sato, right now 7th quickest in this morning's session. Suddenly, we don't often see purples against Sato's name. You may see it early in a session, but not sort of midway through a session, and done a good job. He goes up to 4th quickest with a 1:14.112.
So are they running a little lighter on fuel in this Jordan? Maybe we'll find out later on this afternoon. But Sato attacking once again. Speed trap wise, it is Mika Salo with the highest speed in this session so far, ahead of Fisichella and Panis. So Honda power once again featuring at pretty much at the top of the speed trap figures. We've seen that throughout the weekend. The Honda engines have been producing plenty of power, there's no doubt about that. Now on board with Kimi Raikkonen through turn 11, and now the flat out section through the banking, and Kimi Raikkonen, of course, he'll be starting in 6th place here today. That's a little bit disappointing for him, 3rd row start, but looking to try and get a decent finish in. He's had so many mechanical problems this year. He goes second fastest, ahead of Irvine, still about 0.4 of a second slower than Michael Schumacher.
Yeah, another indication that the performance of the McLaren with the Michelin tyre may well eclipse that of Williams, as we saw David Coulthard out-qualified both of the Williams. Kimi Raikkonen, no doubt, was restricted because the spare car was maybe not to his liking, and he ended up rather disappointed in 6th place.
Jenson Button seemingly having...
34 that just came off the car. We get back in the garage, please. That goes straight back on. Thanks, mate.
Similar problems to Fisichella, perhaps, so they're pushing him back up the pit lane.
Well, in the meantime, Olivier Panis, here we see him coming out into turn 13, has gone fastest, as we saw just a moment ago with Takuma Sato. So the Bridgestone tyre obviously works very well on the BAR and on the Jordan in that middle sector, but also it makes you wonder just what level of fuel, as you mentioned, Ben, are both these teams carrying right now.
Panis goes fastest then, ahead of Michael Schumacher. We haven't seen anybody much faster than Michael Schumacher throughout this weekend so far. He's dominated every session, every free practice session, and of course qualifying as well. Panis did a good job at Monza running a light car, didn't he? That earned him 6th place in the end, the final point. So I wonder if they might try and follow a similar philosophy this weekend. Montoya coming out now.
Yes, Montoya, he's done 9 laps, all the way down in 14th place for what it's worth. Ralf Schumacher, slowest of all, in 20th place. He's done 2 laps, he's gone back out again, but he's just come straight back into the pits. So certainly a great restriction being placed on Ralf Schumacher's running. So Montoya just going out. Michael Schumacher lines up behind him, and he's going to do another launch control start. There it goes.
That was interesting, because he wasn't actually stopped.
No, he just gave it a blast. Right. Now he's going to do the launch control.
Okay. Really, it's fascinating to watch, isn't it, when that traction control system cuts in, just you get a little bit of wheel spin. That is the quickest way to get just a hint of wheel spin, but it's all controlled electronically, of course.
Yes, and there's no way that a human being could transfer 900 horsepower or whatever the Ferrari engine's producing these days to the tarmac through the narrow wheel and tyre that Formula 1 cars these days use without the aid of electronics. So it is pretty remarkable. And once that car gets rolling, of course, acceleration. They did a test recently with a Jaguar 0 to 100 to 0, and it did it in about 5.1 seconds. So 0, 100, 0, 5.1 seconds gives you an indication just how effective launch control is.
Yeah, it's astonishing, isn't it? That's part of and parcel of Formula 1 these days. Peter, did you have something to add?
Yes, on a couple of subjects, Ben. Just first adding to what John was saying about launch control, a bit worrying to see problems with both Fisichella and Jenson Button this morning with launch control, both their cars stalling at the exit of the pit lane here. And also following up on what you were saying at the beginning of the show about changing downforce, both Williams and Toyota noticeably have taken off that third element of the rear wing for the race today.
Right, okay, so major changes aerodynamically, and just looking at the speed track figures, we're looking at quite a few cars now tied at the top with 339 kilometers per hour. Salo, Fisichella and Panis, so 1 Toyota and 2 Honda powered cars now topping those speed track figures, and some different figures being thrown up from yesterday in qualifying.
Barrichello looking to go top of the list, currently in 3rd place, fastest in that middle sector again. The Bridgestone team cars seem to be really strong there. Barrichello comes across the line and goes quickest on a 13.321.
Down towards turn 1. I don't know whether the microphone is somewhat differently placed on the Ferrari, somewhat muted sound levels from that Ferrari V10.
And while Barrichello has gone fastest, Michael Schumacher is probably going to go and do the same thing. He's now quickest through 1st sector. We've not seen a Ferrari quickest through that sector to date. Irvine also now quickest through that final sector. He's gone to 6th quickest place, but it's going to be Michael Schumacher we want to have a little look at as they two McLarens back into the garage, and they've dropped out of the top 6 with Coulthard. Well, no, Raikkonen is 4th, Coulthard's dropped down to 7th.
Fastest time in last year's warm-up was a 1:13.9, so they're well underneath that already with a 1:13.2 for Rubens Barrichello. But let's see what Michael Schumacher sets this time. Likely to go faster. We ride on board with the world champion. And let's take a look at the time as he crosses the line, a 1:13.183. So he goes fastest once again. Ferrari 1-2 ahead of BAR, Honda, McLaren, Toyota and Jaguar.
So Barrichello comes round to complete another lap. He's gone from quickest to 2nd. And this lap doesn't look as if it's going to be an improvement. No, it's not. It's well, it's about half a second slower than his best, but obviously the 0.6 of a second relates to Michael Schumacher.
Just under 5 minutes to go then in this final session before the build-up towards the Grand Prix.
We're just getting a little look back, and whether the Jaguar or somebody's going to... Oh, Montoya sneaks down the inside, locks it up. De La Rosa does use his mirror this time and gets a view of the Williams on a launch dive down the inside. Just interesting, I think, also, Ben, that suddenly Mika Salo, who was nowhere yesterday in qualifying, he sort of popped up to be 5th quickest in the Toyota.
Yeah, it's a good effort and a little bit more promising. Again, a little bit like Eddie Irvine. He went reasonably well yesterday morning. He was 11th fastest in the Saturday morning free practice, only to qualify 19th with changing conditions, or whether they just set the car up wrong, I'm not sure. But both Irvine and Salo could well be worth watching in the race this afternoon.
Yeah, Salo will have a very difficult task, starting all the way back on the back row of the grid alongside Alex Young. Nevertheless, if the team do opt to go with a low fuel load, it will give him a chance at the end of the straight to use that horsepower.
Through the bank section, turn 13. He's got a little bit of a tow here from Heinz-Harald Frentzen in the Sauber just ahead.
Yeah, Ben, they're also using a different rear wing to that they used yesterday. That looks to me like a 2-element rear wing, where certainly yesterday they did have a 3-element rear wing on, and that's probably where some of the speed is coming from, as Nick Heidfeld just sort of fails to negotiate into turn 8, drives onto the grass, and no trouble whatsoever.
I tell you what, that grass is not as slippery as it was on Friday, John. It was very wet and slippery, but he seemed to get away with that more easily this time.
Yeah, but just the ambient temperatures have warmed up, and of course yesterday was a gorgeous afternoon, and there's been no rain since. So fortunately the additional moisture that was there on Friday and certainly Saturday mornings has gone.
So up to 340 kilometers per hour.
Sorry to going too quick. Going 1 second, so we are next up. How's the balance change on that run? It's a good change, but it's not enough, Karen. Because when
Olivier Panis working with David Lloyd, his race engineer. David Coulthard ready to do a little launch control start at the end of the pits. And he does so cleanly as we watch Ralf Schumacher head on around. Ralf Schumacher hasn't done that many laps so far here in this morning's warm-up. Down in 14th place at the moment, 7 laps completed. We've had 15 laps now completed by Rubens Barrichello.
Yes, Ralf Schumacher set out pretty much over half of this session, went out a few minutes ago. So Ralf currently 14th and a 1:14.6. And it's unusual. I don't know what's going on with Williams, but they're actually down in terms of top speed in the straight, which is the area where they're always very strong.
We'll keep an eye on those figures as they change throughout the day, and of course different tactics from different teams in terms of looking for straight line speed. Montoya, big lock up as he goes past McNish down at turn 1. I think he made it through, but that all looked a bit dramatic for this time of the morning.
Yeah, but just trying to think and analyse what's going on. Williams is not particularly quick in a straight line. Interestingly, also Ferrari's they're not sitting in the top 6 in terms of top speeds, and one might think that is the purpose of being slightly slower on the straight, is maybe tyre conservation, that over the period of a long run, if you're going to do a one-stopper, you don't want to scuff your tyres to such a degree because you're sliding around in the infield that the tyre performance just drops off so dramatically that lap time would drop away as well. So it's an interesting look. 3:29, current speed 3:27 against Fisichella's 3:41, so that's a big bunch of time.
It is a big bunch of time, and makes you wonder if they'll employ different tactics to some of the midfield teams. Still the work going on David Coulthard's car. Remember, it was a fuel leak that they were worried about. This is what happened with Montoya a moment ago. Just look to the right, locked up down the inside of McNish, almost as if McNish saw him coming, backed off quite late. Coulthard still in the spare car in the McLaren.
Yes, just watching Montoya in that replay, it is also quite bumpy up in there, and if you do make a lunge as Montoya did down the inside, you're almost slightly offline entering the corner on that bumpy part of the track, and it's a bit of a sort of hit and miss whether you're going to get away with it.
Well, I think he did get away with it just about, but we could see some action down there in the race itself as people try and use that, which is really the major overtaking opportunity at this circuit. There really isn't anywhere else. You can sometimes try and get down the inside of someone on the back stretch, but it usually ends in tears. So it is this part of the circuit where we will likely see most of the overtaking manoeuvres attempted. David Coulthard across the line, he's down in 7th place in this session. Checkered flag and Montoya spins just to finish things off.
Yeah, so when Pablo Montoya eventually, he's been looking quite ragged, and then so Pedro de la Rosa is just about to go on the inside. This is turn 9 and 10, and Juan Pablo just lifts the clutch and off he goes, and Pedro de la Rosa had to back off. Let's look again and see. Oh, well, we've got the replay, but just missed the action as Takuma Sato comes up, takes the checkered flag, goes 4th quickest. Very good little fillip for the Japanese driver, and no doubt that will cause a little bit of relief for the Jordan team in their personal battle with BAR and Jaguar for who will be 6th in the Manufacturers' Championship.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing if that gets resolved, not fully, but what changes we'll see before the last Grand Prix in Suzuka in 2 weeks' time. David Coulthard, currently 5th in the World Drivers' Championships, got 37 points. He's 5 points behind Ralf Schumacher. Starts 3rd today. Must fancy his chances of perhaps closing that gap up to Ralf, if Ralf has some sort of mechanical problem in particular. Across the line, 8th fastest then for Coulthard, just ahead of Jenson Button and just behind Eddie Irvine. So we've got 3 Brits together in this morning's warm-up, just inside the top 10.
So this is the replay of Montoya's little incident. Well, that just was careless, just too much power. I mean, he was round the corner, virtually just floored the throttle.
So what happened to the traction control there then?
Well, I think if you break traction as he did, then just the sheer momentum of the car will spin it round. And there he just cuts right in front of Pedro de la Rosa. And Connie, the fiancé, just has a little wry smile and thinks, well, that was quite cute.
As long as he doesn't do it in the race, then it'll be okay. Of course, it wasn't a good time last time at Monza. Car ended up damaged, suspension damaged, although they reckoned that they found some flexing or some problem with a suspension mounting, and that's what caused the problems for Montoya. Ferrari have ended up this morning warm-up 1st and 2nd fastest. No great surprise there. They dominated qualifying yesterday, and they have dominated just about every practice session this weekend.
Yes, but Ben, the surprise is, wait and see the top speeds, wait and see where Ferrari are. Barrichello 329, 17th, where's Michael Schumacher?
Yeah, he's a long way down the list, isn't he? But it doesn't seem to matter,
well,
because
he's 19th, 328. The Ferraris are, other than Ralf Schumacher, the slowest cars in the straight line. Now, that's a bit of an oddity. You would have to believe, of course, starting as they are, front row of the grid, they probably had a lot more fuel on board maybe as well. Nevertheless, that speed, a lot of people will look at that. They'll try and maybe second guess what Ferrari would be intending to do. So, well, a bit of head scratching out down the pit lane, and with 4 hours to go before the start of this Grand Prix, it's anybody's guess.
So Schumacher, Barrichello fastest again. The Bridgestone's going well in the cooler morning conditions, but the temperature beginning to rise already very, very quickly. That could suit the Michelin runners, people like David Coulthard, who of course will start in 3rd place. Montoya only 11th fastest in this morning's warm-up. Heinz-Harald Frentzen 12th. Looking forward to his first start for Sauber for some 6 years here today as he returns to the team that gave him his first Grand Prix chance. Jarno Trulli 13th, then Villeneuve, he'll be a factor in this race, starting 7th. Schumacher, Ralf way down in 16th, ahead of De La Rosa and McNish, with Webber and Jung bringing up the rear once again. But once more, look how close Mark Webber's time is to Alan McNish, and he's already starting ahead of Mika Salo. Webber's going to be having a bit of go, I think, particularly in the early laps.
Well, engine still running in the BAR pits. Olivier Panis knows it's painful, so just blocks his ears, helps himself feel more comfortable.
Let's take a look at the highlights.